Hello and welcome back to the Web Dev Coach, where my goal is to teach you web development. In this video, I'll be continuing with the node.js timestamp microservice that we're making following the FreeCodeCamp curriculum. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, go back to my last video. It's the environment setup for node.js and the introduction to the FreeCodeCamp project that we're making, the FreeCodeCamp timestamp microservice. In the last video, we went through the environment setup. In this video, we'll be going through routes and more importantly, we'll be going through and understanding route parameters and how to use them. So let's get to the project. Here we are in index.js where we left off in the last video. And I actually want to install a new dev dependency to our package.json. I want to install a hot reloading dev server. And that hot reloading dev server package is called node.mon. Now what this package will do is monitor the node files in your repository, and if you're running the server, it'll reload whenever you update a file. So it makes it really easy to do development and not have to manually shut off and restart the server. That can take a really long time, and node.mon is amazing at fixing that. So, in order to use node.mon, after running npm I node.mon save dev, and you'll see that command right here, let's add another script here that reads in quotes node.mon index.js, and we can run that script by using npm run dev, just like that. And let's go to here in my web browser. Localhost 8000, and you'll see that timestamp microservice works. Great. Now, if you remember from the spec, we have to get the date string out of the route. And I'll teach you exactly how to get the content of that query, not the query parameter, I'm sorry, of the route parameter out of that URL. In our index.js, we'll make a new route get /API /timestamp date string with a colon. And that'll be the first parameter of the app.get function. It's the string where that route should live. The second parameter is a function, right? And that's how we denote a function using the arrow syntax. In that function, the first parameter of that function is the request. That is the incoming request from the client. And the second parameter of that function is the response. And that's the response that we'll be sending back to the client. This date string variable here actually lives inside of that request. We can pull it out of the request. The only thing we need to know is where exactly datestring lives. Datestring actually lives in request.params.datestring. So params is a object inside of the request object that holds all of the route parameters inside of it. So the first route parameter of API /timestamp is datestring. For now, let's just console log out datestring, and see its contents. Actually, on top of console logging it, let's actually respond to the client with date string. And again, remember date string is just the rest of the URL here. So let's go back to our browser here. We'll type in API timestamp hello world. You'll see here that we get hello world in the client because we responded with hello world, and we also get hello world here in the console. So again, to recap, date string or whatever we name it, it could be named literally baloney right here, and it'll live in request.params.baloney if you want. In our case, we're calling it date string. And that's what we need to know for route parameters. The next thing I want to do here is actually copy these instructions into our program. That way we know exactly what we're doing. So I'm going to take a second to just copy this into our program, into our function in the appropriate places. Great, so I copied the comments right into our function. And it just helps to get the ideas organized of exactly what the function should do. So let's start with this direction. If the date string is empty, it should be equivalent to triggering a new date object. And the date string that they're referring to is this. I do want you to notice, again, let's just respond with a, respond with a JSON object that is the date string. I do want you to notice that if we do have an empty date string object, we currently cannot get /API timestamp. And that's because the route parameter here is currently required instead of optional. To make it optional, we simply add a question mark to the end of that variable name of the route parameter, and you'll see here, let's try again to get /timestamp. You'll see that we get a empty JSON this time, which is a lot better than the error we got before, and we're getting that empty JSON because date string is empty. So if there is no date string, if it's empty, date should equal a new date. Now you're probably wondering, I did not initialize date, so I'm going to initialize it right there on line 7. So again, if there's no date string, date should equal a new date, and if the date string is valid, it should return a JSON with the structure Unix. So it should have a Unix property that is date.getTime, and a UTC property that is date.toUTC_string, just like that. So let's look what we did. Again, if the date string is empty, we make date string is empty right there, right? We make a date that is triggering a new date, aka the current timestamp. Let's just take a second to go back and check that we're doing that correctly. You'll see here the date string is empty. I'm going to refresh and I get today's date, Saturday, February 16th, and the time right now in GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Great. We actually did half of the project basically. Now, if it's not empty, we want the date to equal a new date of date string, right? And we're going to still consider if the string is valid, right? So let's use a valid string, 2015, 12/25, Christmas, and you'll see that it comes up as Friday, 25 December 2015. So we have finished the if the date is valid, it returns an API of structure, Unix, etc. And this is the case of a non-empty date string. Now, the last thing we have to do is check if the date is invalid. Now, I just want you to notice we're going to log out date string dot to string. I do believe that exists. I hope that exists. And let's pass in a garbage string to the URL here. Right, so you'll see that it's invalid date here, and this is null. I personally think this should be enough, but the FreeCodeCamp spec does say that we should return an error and an invalid date there. So you'll see that they, oh no, I'm sorry, I meant date.toString. And let's refresh again. And you'll see here that the string reads quote unquote invalid date. So we can actually check here. So if the date string is invalid, that would mean that date.toString is equal to invalid date, right? And if that's the case, we actually want to respond with JSON that says error invalid date. Funny enough, invalidate is the same thing as date.toString. So that's if it's an invalid API. Else, we can do this here. Just to recap, the date is invalid, we return invalid date, which is the same thing as date.toString, and we know a date is invalid if date.toString says invalid date. And else, we return the Unix time as follows. So let's try with our garbage string again. You'll see that we appropriately get error invalid date. The last thing we want to look at is this case here, where we have a Unix timestamp being passed in as an integer. So let's paste that right in there, and you'll see that we get error invalid date when that's not really what we want. We want this Unix timestamp to have the same output as the 2015 1225 timestamp. Now, one way, the way I want to do it here is in the else statement, which is the non-empty string, we want to check if the date string is a number. So if date string is number, new date of if date string is a number, convert date string to an integer, right? There we go. And else we're okay, right? We don't need to do any conversions. And the way in JavaScript to test if a string actually represents a number is, think about it. It's not a number. It's a number. It's not a number. So what we do is we use the is not a number function, and we say is not a number. I know it's really confusing, but it's like a double negative kind of thing. And here we are. Let's date will equal a new date of date string, and we'll parse it. We'll force it to be a number, right? And parse int is the function that we use to convert an integer. To convert a string to an integer. So if it's not a number, convert it to an integer. Else, we're okay. Just leave it alone, right? So this here should check if it's a Unix timestamp. we do the conversion and pass that conversion into date, else we just pass the string straight up. So that should work. Let's give it a check, obviously. And there we are. That worked. So this is the Unix timestamp here. And let's check that we didn't break anything else. Let's check our string. That works. Let's check garbage. That works. And lastly, let's check the empty string. And that works just as we want it to. So that's the code. That's it right there. I'll give you one last glance at it. I hope I answered all your questions. If not, please leave a comment in the comment section below. If you liked the way I teach, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. Please click subscribe. That keeps me going. That keeps me wanting to make more of these videos. And lastly, I started a Twitch channel where I kind of just stream and hang out and stream things that I'm actually creating in React, Node, GraphQL, etc. So check me out on check me out on Twitch. I'll leave the link below. I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks. Bye.